Okay, I'm going to be talking to my mom about our family history, and we're going to be talking about her parents and grandparents. So we're going to start off by talking about anything that she remembers that her parents have talked about World War II. Mom, do you want to share?
Sure. Do you want me to start even before World War II?
Yeah, go ahead.
Because my parents were both born in the 1920s. So they would tell stories about the Great Depression. And they did, they were both young children, but they remembered what it was like during the Great Depression. My mom grew up in a family that was rather affluent before the Depression. And so when the Depression came, her family was hit rather hard and lost a lot of money and lost a lot of land and even lost their home at one time. And they had been living in Indiana. And after the Depression, they all had to pack up and move in with relatives in Kentucky. So those are some of the first things that she remembered talking about. I mean, I remember her talking about as a child was moving from Indiana from a big house to moving in with relatives in Kentucky because they all needed to live together to save money.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my dad grew up completely different. He had grown up on a farm, very rural community in Georgia, and said really the Depression didn't hit them very hard. They were already poor before the Depression, and they were just poor afterwards also. So that's what I remember them saying about the Great Depression. And because of that, they spent their life really trying to save up, and it always affected them their whole life.
Yeah. Do you think that affected you growing up?
Well, I heard their stories, but I couldn't believe when I studied about the Depression in school that my parents had actually been children during that time.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I probably should have saved more than I did growing up. So.
Yeah. Well, what event do you think really made our family, like the biggest event in our family history?
Well, World War II was a huge event for my family. My dad was actually in the Army Air Corps, which was what the Air Force was called during World War II. And he was a fighter pilot. He had trained to be a fighter pilot. And that was a huge honor for him and a great responsibility. My mom's sister, my aunt, was also what they call an Army nurse during that time. And she actually went all over the world during World War II on battleships, on I guess, hospital ships. And there are some great family stories of some of the things that she saw and some of the things that she did during World War II. And she went all over. My dad, unfortunately, are you there?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm just listening.
It makes a strange noise.
Oh,
My dad, unfortunately, had a plane crash, so he saw limited time in World War II and ended up with a broken back and in the hospital for months and months. So that ended his career, and I think he always kind of regretted that he didn't get to fight like all his fellow pilots as much as they did. But my mom stayed home as a nurse here stateside during World War II. And of course, they have all kinds of souvenirs that were left of things. We have everyone's uniforms from that time that I still have in the trunk here, and medals and honors. And it was quite an honor to know that your family fought and were part of the greatest generation during World War II.
Yeah. So you think that Granddad's airplane crash could have saved his life after all?
Well, that's what your grandma always said. She said that him crashing before really the war got going really big probably, saved him from who knows what in the future.
Yeah.
I think, though, for him, he was always trained to be a pilot, and they have the mentality if you're going to join up at that time, you want to fight. You want to fight for your country. And he came back after he recovered and worked hard stateside to support all the boys who were over across the sea.
Yeah.
So.
Well, tell me about you growing up in your school experience. I know you said that at one point you faced the schools being desegregated and stuff.
Well, actually, when I started first grade was the first year that our local schools were integrated. So it was the first or second year. So it was not really commonplace here for everyone to go to school together. Of course, I was only first grade. I didn't know any different. As a first grader, people are people. And you don't know unless you hear from adults that there are attitudes about different people. So I noticed people were different colors, but it didn't matter when you're a small child. It doesn't matter.
Right. So do you think that has made you a different teacher since you kind of went through that, or no?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I've grown up going to school with all different kinds of people, and we're just all people. I mean, we all have bleed red, and we all have the same heart. So, yeah, most definitely. I can't even imagine the days of desegregation, I guess, is the whole thing. I can't even imagine the cruelty of that and just the ideas that were behind all of that, because I didn't grow up that way.
Whenever you started school, were African American kids still being treated bad, or was it pretty much equal, even though they were not segregated anymore?
I was a child. I don't really remember. We were all friends. We all played together. I mean, I remember some of my best friends growing up had different skin colors, but we all were friends and we played together. And I know I had good friends. I remember birthday parties where I had girls come over for spend the night parties that were all colors and from all backgrounds. And it was just a wonderful community that I grew up in, that we didn't still, nobody still held the grudges.
Sorry, the dogs are barking. Hold on. I'll close my door. Well, what about September 11th? Do you remember where you were? Because that's one of the main events in history that I can remember. What do you remember about that?
Right. Well, I was teaching school at that time, so I was at school, and it's one of those things where I guess your grandparents remember every single moment of Pearl Harbor.
Yeah.
Hearing that news, and that I can remember every single moment of hearing about the attacks on 9/11, and I was at school. I was actually in a parent conference when the word first broke that what had happened, and we just sat there in silence and couldn't imagine that it was a terrorist attack. We just assumed it was really bad wreck at first, some kind of tragedy. And then by lunchtime that day, more news was coming out, and the whole school, even though our very small children didn't really know anything was going on, all the adults, it was very somber. I just remember the rest of the day was surreal.
Yeah.
And then coming to, I guess, pick y'all up after school when you were at your sitter after school, and just coming to get you, and just everybody just stood in front of TVs and just watched everything just play over and over again.
Yeah.
I think what's strange now is to know that I teach children who, of course, were not even alive then, and to them, this is already history.
Yeah.
And to us, it's something that seems like it just happened.